Do a review of Lekutei Sichas chelek Tezayin. This is the third Sicha for the Parshas Terumah. This Sicha, the Rebbe explains various different halachas that we learn in the Parsha of Osuli Migdosh about the Beis HaMikdosh. The Rebbe explains various different Rambams, one in Hilchos Beis HaBechira and then in Hilchos Malachim, and the various different psukim that the Rambam uses to support the halachas and why the Rambam chooses these psukim versus other psukim. It seems to change it also from the Medrash and from the Gemara. A whole big arichas explaining the various specific Rambams, as the Rebbe will explain how everything falls into place beautifully. And in the end, we'll also have Al Pi Pnimi Shenyor. So let's look inside. Terumah Gimel Aleph. The Rebbe says that from Posik v'Osuli Migdosh v'Shachanti b'Seichom. So this is the Posik in our Parsha, the Parshas Terumah. Make for me a sanctuary, and I will dwell amongst you. This is the mitzvah that Hashem is instructing Moshe Rabbeinu that the Yidden should make for me, for Hashem, a sanctuary so that I can dwell amongst them. So, learn Taruis, the Rambam in Hilchos Beis HaBechira. So the Rambam in the laws of the chosen house, where the Rambam discusses all the laws about the Beis HaMikdash, or the Rambam calls it the Beis HaBechira, the chosen house. So this is the verse that the Rambam uses as evidence that mitzvahs aseh lasis bayis laHashem. It is a positive mitzvah to build, to make a house for Hashem. Muchan liyos makrivin boyakorbonis, that should be ready, that in that house, you should bring the offerings. And he uses the evidence, the proof from the pasuk shenemar va'osuli migdosh. So osuli migdosh, the Rambam uses as a proof that you should make for me a Beis HaMikdash, a Beis HaBechira. The pasuk that is in our parsha, which talks about the building of the Mishkan, the Rambam uses that as the pasuk that to prove that there is a mitzvah saseh to build a house for Hashem. Shenemar v'osili migdash. The Rambam continues, Ukvar nisparish b'Torah Mishkan she'oso Moshe Rabbeinu. In the Torah, it's been detailed, articulated, explained the Mishkan that Moshe Rabbeinu made. But v'hoyo lifisho, that was a temporary structure. Shenemar, as the pasuk says, ki lebosem adoto v'goymer. So the pasuk says in the A that you have not yet come el amnucha vel anachla. We learn out the various stages that the people of Israel, they went through until finally they did come to the menucha nachla, which is the Beis HaMikdash eventually. So the pasuk that the Rambam uses to bring the mitzvah of building the Beis HaMikdash, he brings the pasuk of our parsha that talks about the building of the Mishkan, v'osuli Mikdash. But in Hilchos Malachim, then we have to look what the Rambam writes in the laws of Malachim. Over there, the Rambam discusses the three mitzvahs that Yidden have to do in Eretz Yisrael. Three mitzvahs, and one of those mitzvahs is the building of the Beis HaMikdash. That's also a mitzvah when they go into Eretz Yisrael. But the Rambam uses a different pasuk, not the pasuk Osuli Mikdash, to prove the building of the Beis HaMikdash. And the question is, why does the Rambam change the psukim? Oh, but in Hilchos Melachim, but in the laws of Melachim, learned as is the Rambam from another pasuk. Over there, the Rambam derives the mitzvah of building the Beis HaMikdash from a different pasuk. And this is quoting what the Rambam says over there, that Sholish mitzvahs nitztavu Yisrael b'shas knisosum la'eretz. There are three mitzvahs that the Yidden were instructed, they were commanded at the time they go into Eretz Yisrael. By the way, the Rebbe will explain all the Lashonos and the reasons for the Rambam writing along in the Sikha. But right now, we're just asking the question, the Rebbe is asking the question, why the Rambam uses another pasuk. So what are the three mitzvahs that the Yidden were instructed when they go into Eretz Yisrael? So we have over there, we have the erasing Amalek, and the Rambam says, and finally, there is Livnei's Beis HaBechira. They point a king, and they raise Amalek, and they point a king, and they build the Beis HaBechira. Shenemar. Where does we know that you build the Beis HaMikdash? Because it says L'shichnoi sidreshu v'asar shama. This is a pasuk in Parshas Rei in Devarim. Over there, the pasuk says that when you come, Amokim Eretz Yisrael, L'shichnoi sidreshu, you should seek where Hashem rests His Shekhinah, and you come there. So there is a place where the Shekhinah that you need to seek it, that's the Beis HaMikdash. You come there, so therefore we know there's the need to be a place to building the Beis HaMikdash. Is Yedu the Kushya, so it's known the question, Vabos bringt nido demselben Posik, why does he not bring it the same Posik was bringt in Onfang, because Beis HaBechira that he brings in the beginning of the laws of Beis HaBechira. The Rambam similarly should have said over here, that's the source for the building of the Beis HaMikdash that the Rambam quotes in Beis HaBechira. So when he brings down about the three mitzvahs, and one of them is the building of the Beis HaMikdash, he should have brought that same pasuk that he has in Beis HaBechira. The Lechem Mishnah entered them. The Lechem Mishnah, the commentary on the Rambam, answers on this as der Posik va'osu limigdash red vega mishkan hamidbar. He says that this Posik va'osu limigdash is not really a mitzvah to build the Beis HaMikdash because it specifically talks about the Mishkan that was in the desert. Under Posik l'shichnei sidreshu, but when it says you should seek Hashem where He rests, meant the Mishkan Shiloi. That means the Mishkan that on the way to Yerushalayim, as the Rebbe will bring down later on from the Rambam, the Loshen as well, and explain that there was a process that they went and Givon and Neuv and Shiloi until they came to Yerushalayim. So exactly this L'shichne Sidreshu, whether it means Mishkan Shiloi, Virashi types, or it means Yerushalayim, the Rebbe Da'ores discusses. The bottom line is we're talking about a more permanent Beis HaMikdash rather than the Mishkan that was constantly put up and disassembled and assembled as they were traveling. So the Pasuk L'Shichnei Sidreshu means the Mishkan Shilui. Virashi Tai. Rashi says Shichnei Sidreshu means the Mishkan Shilui. Or, as the Rebbe brings down the Oren later on, it means the Beis Elomim, but at least it talks about not a temporary as the temporary of the Mishkan. So the Lech Mishnah says, "Ukehechi the Bishilo b'Midbar he mitzvah." So just like by Shiloi, it is a mitzvah. Even though this pasuk is talking about Shiloi, and in the Midbar there is a mitzvah. So for sure we have to say, if the Torah said there's a mitzvah on the temporary and there's a mitzvah on the Shiloi, Beis HaMikdash, which was also temporary, not permanent, so therefore we know that on the Beis HaBechira, which was permanent, for sure there's a mitzvah. So basically the Rambam doesn't bring in Hilchos Malachim the pasuk of Osuli Migdash, because Osuli Migdash specifically is talking about the Mishkan, and the Rambam wants to talk about something which is more permanent. But it's very difficult to answer so, because why would the Rambam then bring it in Beis HaBechira as the main source for the mitzvah? The Rambam is not talking about in Beis HaBechira about the mitzvah building the Mishkan. In the Beis HaBechira, we're talking about the chosen house, about the Beis HaMikdash. That's a talking about the more permanent Beis Hamikdash. He should rather bring the pasuk of Shiloh or Beis Elomim rather than bringing a pasuk from that only talks about specifically about the Mishkan, as the Lecha Mishnah says that the pasuk V'Osuli Migdash. It seems like the Rambam thinks that the pasuk V'Osuli Migdash does apply to the Beis Hamikdash. The Beis Hamikdash, he uses that as the pasuk. This is aber nicht verstanden. This is not really understood. About as binyan beis laHashem, rechen the Rambam in Hilchos Beis Hamikdash, building a structure for Hashem. The Rambam counts in the Beis Hamikdash als mitzvahs asay. He says that is a positive mitzvahs. Und das meint, and what this means is a mitzvah haneheges l'deibus. It's a mitzvah. The Rambam doesn't count mitzvahs that were just for that time. That means that it's a mitzvah which is for the generations. So when the Rambam says that it's a positive mitzvah, he's not saying that they had a mitzvah at the time. He's talking about there's a mitzvah for us that, or for the generations, all the time there was a mitzvah. So why would he bring in Beis Hamikdash over there the pasuk for the source for building a Beis Hamikdash l'doros from the pasuk that talks only Binyan HaMishkan? It's hard to say. Okay, so this pasuk and that pasuk, but as it seems like in Beis Hamikdash, where is the main laws of the mitzvah, over there we bring a pasuk of the Mishkan, and in Hilchos Malachim, we're talking about kings. We're not even talking about the Beis Hamikdash. Over there, it brings the real pasuk for the Beis Hamikdash. According to the Lecha Mishnah, the pasuk brought in Beis Hamikdash, where we're talking about the Beis Hamikdash. That's the discussion. That's the laws of the Beis Hamikdash. Over there, we're bringing a pasuk which only talks about the Mishkan. And later on, Hilchos Malachim, we're talking about Malachim. We're just bringing in that there's also a mitzvah to build a Beis Hamikdash. Over there, we bring the right pasuk. It's as in Hilchos Beis Hamikdash and the laws of Beis Hamikdash, Bas Kishmon, Kain Hain. The name Beis Hamikdash, this is what they are. As the ganze Teuchen, the whole contents is the mitzvah sasei l'doros. We're talking about the positive mitzvah for generation from Binyan Beis Hamikdash. So Zoller bringing over there, he's bringing a pasuk Vuder Tzivu Yizoif Mishkan HaMidbar, where the command was only for the Mishkan the Midbar. And in Hilchos Malachim and the laws of Malachim, Bos Kishmon Kein Haim, what is we talking the name? That's what it is. What are we talking about there? As is Retzich Beikir Vegem Mitzvahs Minu Melech. We're talking about the king. We're talking about appointing a king over there. He brings down, there was other mitzvahs associated with it. But Ozoler bringing the pasuk L'Shichnei Sidrashu. Over there, he brings L'Shichnei Sidrashu Vaseret Vegem Mishkan Shiloh and Beis Elomim. As mentioned before, that it talks about the Mishkan Shiloh or the eternal Beis Hamikdash, but at least it's talking about more. So that's Tafke in Melech. So the main source we're talking about the mitzvah, the pasuk which talks only about the midbar, and over there we're talking about a pasuk that talks about Shiloh and Beis Elomim. Wow, how come? So Rebbe brings down now base that l'chayre came for maybe we can say the source Osuli Migdash. The Rambam is not inserting the mitzvah Beis Hamikdash and Beis Hamikdash from Osuli Migdash Shanti B'Seicha, because that's really talking about the midbar. But the Rambam is just bringing it down as the major first clear indication that there is such a thing of a Mikdash. And from there on, there is specifically the details is other psukim. As the Rambam brings in Hilchos Beis Hamikdash the pasuk, also the Mikdash. Over there, he brings the pasuk of the Mikdash. Nit al sivuy from Mishkan. He's not bringing it down to tell you there was a destruction of the Mishkan, because that wouldn't help us. Nor val funim lemon of the mitzvah klolis from Binyan Beis Hamikdash. From that pasuk, we learn the general mitzvah that there's a mitzvah to build a Beis Hamikdash. We make it fit us in Medrashim, as we find in Medrashim, what we learn out from the general Mishkan that was built in the Midbar. If you say is over Tzurik mit verstandig, okay. So in that case, okay, so you're saying that we're just bringing down the pasuk because that gives you the general idea. So was by mitzvahs in Hilchos Malachim. So then, how come when the Rambam talks the mitzvah of building the Beis Hamikdash, when he mentions it in the laws of Malachim, bring that another pasuk? So why should he bring? Why does he bring that general pasuk? Why does he bring the pasuk over there? The Shichnei Sidr Shuv Asar Shamo, the pasuk in the A. He should have still brought this general idea, concept of the over there is not the place where we're talking about the main place of the mitzvah. So if in the main place of the mitzvah, which is the Beis HaMechira, he brings the general concept of building a mishkan from the pasuk of the mishkan of the desert, not because that was the mitzvah, but just to tell you about the general concept. Why does he change the pasuk in Hilchos Malachim? Ubiyoser Yuksha, the Rebbe says, actually, it seems like the Rambam changes the pasuk from the source that the Rambam brings it down. It seems that the Rambam source is the Medrash, and the Rambam brings a different pasuk in Hilchos Malachim than the Medrash, which is his source. Ubiyoser Yuksha, and even more it becomes difficult. It says, from the style, the language that Rambam writes, it appears, it's not clear, but it appears as the Mokar from Rambam in Hilchos Malachim, that what is the source for the Rambam in the laws of Malachim is from the Medrash, the Rebbe is calling it was bring the Pasik, and in the Medrash, it does bring the Pasik V'osuli Migdosh from Beis HaMikdash. The Rebbe deals with the order. Some people say it's from the Gemara, actually, but the Rebbe learns that the source of the Rambam is the Medrash, and the Medrash Taka does bring the pasuk V'osuli Migdosh from Beis Hamikdash, and the Rambam takes it out and brings another pasuk. The Rambam writes like this. This is what the Medrash says. That is the source of the Rambam. Ashloisha Dvorim. The Yidden were commanded on 3 items when they went into Eretz Yisrael. Limnes Aleha Melech, first they have to appoint a king. The Livnes Loahem Beis HaMechira, and they need to build a chosen house. They need to build a Beis HaMikdash. And they have to, third thing is, they have to cut off the seed of Amalek. And then the Rambam continues. Where do we see all this? Limnes Alehem Melech. You should appoint a king on them. Diksiv, because the pasuk says Soim Tosim Alacha Melech. You should put a king over you. So that's the source of Melech. Livnes Beis HaMechira. So he brings down the pasuk Diksiv V'osuli Migdosh. Because the pasuk Migdosh brings down the pasuk from Beis HaMechira. That the Rambam himself brings down the Beis HaMechira, but that Medrash brings us down in conjunction with these 3 things, which is the source of the Rambam in Hilchos Malachim. And then the third thing is La'achri Zareh Shel Amalek. We learn out Diksi because the pasuk says V'hoya V'honiach Hashem Elikecha Goymer Timcha Zecher Amalek, so that we erase the Amalek, the remembrance of Amalek. We erase Zet Mendoch. So we see here, as by Mzelbun Inyan for the Drei Tzivuyim, but the same subject matter. These 3 commands, that's the subject matter that the Rambam is addressing in Hilchos Malachim, the 3 commands, is a Medrash, the Limud of Mitzvahs Binyanes of Beis HaMechira. So where does the Medrash use to learn out that there is a mitzvah to build the Beis HaMechira from Pasuk V'osuli Migdosh? He uses the Pasuk Migdosh. So how come the Rambam in the laws of Malachim changes from Medrash over Hilchos Beis HaMechira? He changed from Medrash, and from the Hilchos Beis HaMechira he himself wrote, bring them tzivu from another pasuk, and he brings the command from another the command for the building Beis Hamikdash in Hilchos Melachim, he changes it to another pasuk to the Shichnei Sidra Shuvas Shama. Why does he change pasuk Rei? So now, but the Chalal, the Rebbe Nois Gimel asks, even the pasuk V'osu Limigdosh on a general way, and even more than the pasuk, it's also the Parshas Re'ei over there. There's more clearly. It's not only L'Shichnei Sidra Shuvas Shama. The Torah clearly says that it will be a place that Hashem chooses that you have to come there. So why bring a pasuk of V'osu Limigdosh, which is the general mitzvah that I've explained before? That's the general idea of building Beis Mikdash, when there is a very clear pasuk, and we don't necessarily seem to have the pasuk of Mikdash. Gimel. We also need to understand. To build the Beis Hamikdash, which means not the Mishkan, but the Beis Hamikdash, there is a verse and a very clear, specific command. That's not like the Oslo Migdash, which literally talks about the Mishkan, but we say it's generally about building. But we have a special pasuk. The pasuk says, there will be the place where Hashem chooses to rest his name over there. So we see that there needs to be a place that Hashem chooses to rest his name, which is the Beis HaBechira, which is the Beis HaMikdash. The Megafintas in Gemara, as the Gemara quotes this, the Gemara brings down this pasuk as a source for the building of the Beis HaMikdash. The Gemara over there is talking about the same as the Medrash, basically, the same as the Rambam, that there are three mitzvahs. And when they're talking about when they go into Eretz Yisrael, there's a mitzvah to appoint a king, there's a mitzvah to build the Beis HaMikdash, and there's a mitzvah to destroy the seed of Amalek. So on the pasuk for there's a mitzvah to build the Beis HaMikdash, the Gemara uses the pasuk of V'hoya Mokim Asher Yivchar Hashem Elokecha Bo L'Shaken Sham. And also in the Sifri, we also find using this pasuk. If Avos bringt nit the Rambam, so how come the Rambam does not bring? He is talking about, he is counting the mitzvah for generation of them pasuk in honor of Zilchul Beis HaBechira. Why does he bring this pasuk in the beginning of Beis HaBechira? Why does he bring the pasuk V'osu Limigdash? Why doesn't he bring the Meferish pasuk, which refers to the actual building of the Beis HaMikdash? So the Kesef Mishnah answered us. So the Kesef Mishnah says this pasuk V'hoya Mokom Shivcha Hashem Bo L'Shaken Shmei Shom is not a command for the Beis HaMikdash. The Torah is telling you a story. Okay, so you bring it there, but we can't do this. Is not a pasuk with a mitzvah. The Kesef Mishnah answers this. The Kesef Mishnah answers this. But the Rambam learned that their pasuk. The Rambam learns that this verse is not gesagt geworden als Zivui zu bauen a Beis HaMikdash. That wasn't said as a command, as a mitzvah to build a Beis HaMikdash. Not a Sipur Ba'almahud, because the Mishnah says this is just a story. As man soll bringen korbanos lamokoy asher yivchar Hashem. You bring the korbanos where Hashem is chosen. Not that there's a mitzvah over there to build the Beis HaMikdash, but the place where you bring the korbanos is hamokim asher yivchar Hashem tzakash b'sham. Over there, you bring the korbanos. So how does the Gemara use that as a source? Because Mishnah says the Gemara isn't trying, that the Sifri are not trying to bring a pasuk that says that there's a mitzvah to building the Beis HaMikdash. They're just trying to prove from the pasuk the order. Over there in the Gemara discusses what is the order. So he says that those was the Gemara v'Sifri bring Yedem Posik. So why do they bring the Posik? Because before this Posik, B'hoya Shamokim says, B'honiach Hashem Elokecha B'kol Oivecha, which refers to Mechiyas Amalek. The Rambam, the Gemara, and the Rambam and the Sifri, they're all discussing the Rambam Hilchos Malachim and the Gemara that we're quoting now. They're all discussing what are the order of things. So over there, it discusses that first you got rid of Amalek, and then you built the Beis Hamikdash. And the Gemara says, how do we know which comes first later? We know there's 3 mitzvahs, but how do we know that Mechiyas Amalek comes before, erasing Amalek comes before the building of the Beis Hamikdash? So the Gemara uses the pasuk of Re'eh, because it says there, and then the pasuk continues with the pasuk that the Gemara quotes, that the Rebbe. So we're only bringing down the Kesef Mishnah says, that's what the Gemara, v'Sifri bringt jedem pasuk, das bloß als Raya, it's only evidence as Achros Zareh Shel Amalek, that cutting the seed off the seed of Amalek takes precedent, takes scopes first before we build the Beis Hamikdash. So basically, this pasuk, so Kesef Mishnah says that this pasuk is b'chlal not used. This pasuk is b'chlal not used to prove the building of a Beis Hamikdash is a mitzvah. It's used to prove the order that it comes after the Chiyas Amalek. So the Rebbe says, Lifizo, in that case, so we're basically assuming that from this pasuk, there is no evidence. Only the evidence from this pasuk is what? Is that Chiyas Amalek comes first. So, but the Rambam himself, when he tries to say in Hilchos Malachim which comes first, he says the pasuk v'osuli migdosh. Why would he bring the pasuk v'osuli migdosh and he doesn't bring what the Gemara says? V'hoyu b'aniach Hashem Elokecha timcha. The pasuk v'hoya makom Hashem Hashem Elokecha, which the Gemara brings down, which talks about then Re'eh, that after V'aniach Hashem Elokecha, as the Gemara says. So the Rebbe says like this: Vizober is noisef av der nit glatkeit. Besides that, it's not smooth. Mitzad haklal ha'yadu b'Rambam. We know the Rambam's rule as bringt adrosha hapshuta b'yoser, that he brings the very simple drasha, afal pisha le'nimtza is b'shas, even there, though we don't find it in the Gemara. Val derech zeh davzai minid in the Dan. So even though the Rambam doesn't find this in the Gemara, not sure. I think what the Rebbe is saying over here, that even though we just explained that the Gemara doesn't use this as a source for building the Beis Hamikdash, so we're asking, why does the Rambam in Hilchos Beis Hamikdash bring the pasuk V'osuli Migdash? Why doesn't he bring the pasuk of the B'hoya Mokum Sheyivcha Hashem Elokecha L'Shakin Shmoi, which is a more clear pasuk? And even though that the Kesef Mishnah explained that that's not really the Gemara is not really bringing a raya, that this is just bringing a raya in the order of things, but it's not really a proof So the Rebbe's still argument is, but this is even though it's not in the Gemara, but the Rambam should have used it. But I guess what I'm struggling over here is, but maybe the reason the Rambam doesn't use it because he accepts the reasoning that the Rebbe explained why that the Kesef Mishnah says why the Gemara doesn't really consider this as a proof because it's talking about just the order. It's not a proof of building. It's just a story. So why would the Rambam bring that down in Hilchos Beis HaBechira if the Rambam accepts the same reason that the Gemara accepts? I'm not sure why the Rebbe is saying over here that he should have. So what does the Rebbe mean b'nidin dan? That he should have said the pasuk of boy amokum shivchar Hashem lekecha boy, and is loikenu, and it's not, and it doesn't bring it down. So even though there is no Gemara source that building the Beis Hamikdash is built on the pasuk of boy amokum, because the Gemara over there, as the Kesef Mishnah explains, is talking about just it's a story. So, but that if the Rambam accepts that, that's why it doesn't bring. Okay, need to look this into further. But mainly, the Rebbe has another question. The Werde Shaila, Fabros bringt es nicht euch der Rambam in Hilchos Malachim. So in Hilchos Malachim, and where the Rambam doesn't bring this pasuk. The Rambam brings the pasuk of Osuli Migdosh v'Shachanti b'Seicham in Hilchos Malachim as the proof for the Beis Hamikdash. Why doesn't he bring down V'hoya Mokum HaShivchar? At least the order we can learn from there, and that is Al Saraya Achros Zareh Shalom Molik Koidemes Lebinyan Habayis. That cutting the seed of a Molik comes before the building of the Beis Hamikdash. The Rambam actually over there in Hilchos Malachim uses another pasuk for that. The Rambam Hilchos Malachim this is Beis HaBechira. This is the Gemara, but in the so here he says, Minu Melech Koydem Mechemes HaMolik, and then V'chros Zarach Shal Molek El Bin Abayish Nemar V'hik Yoshva Melech B'Beisim Hashem Enich LeBesod Mikol Leivov V'yemer HaMelech Nos Nanovi. Why does the Rambam not bring down this pasuk that we find in the Gemara, as the Kesef Mishnah argues, which is the pasuk that tells us that Achros Zarah Shal Molek comes before, as the Gemara brings down in Sanhedrin, as the Kesef Mishnah argues that that's the pasuk that Achros Zarah Shal Molek couldn't be in Beis HaBechira. So this is now. So this is all trying to figure out the psukim. The Rambam brings in Hilchos Beis HaBechira the pasuk v'osili Migdosh. We have issues with that. It's taka general. Why doesn't the Rambam bring down the pasuk v'hoya mokum sheyivchar? The Rebbe says maybe a mokum sheyivchar is like. And why does the Rambam in Hilchos Malachim bring down the pasuk of Re'ei, the Shichne Sidreshu, and not the pasuk of Beis HaBechira that he brings of Beis HaBechira, the pasuk of Osli Migdosh? Why don't we bring down the pasuk of Makshivchar Boy L'Shakish Mishov? Or at least the Rambam should bring this down in Hilchos Malachim when he talks about what takes precedent, that Zechiyas HaMolek comes before the building of the Beis HaMikdash. So the Rebbe is going to go away now asking other parts of the Rambam. Also, we need explanation in the words of the Rambam in the laws of the Beis HaBechira. Was Nogdam was it is Messiah in Halacha Aleph, after he concludes in the first Halacha, as we quoted before, Ukvar Nisparish B'Torah Mishkan She'oso Moshe Rabbeinu. The Torah has already specified, articulated the Mishkan that Moshe Rabbeinu made. But that was temporarily. Shenemar You have not come yet. The Rambam continues after that. He says, Mamshich in Halacha Beis. So he continues in Halacha Beis. Kivon shenichnasu la'aretz. Once they entered into Eretz Yisrael, Hamidu hamishkon begilgal arba esrei shana shekavshu v'shecholku. The 14 years that it took them to conquer and distribute, divide up the land amongst the Shvatim, they stood up the Mishkan in the Gilgal. Gilgal was the place where the Mishkan stood there for 14 years. After they divided all the tribes, they conquered all of it, so divided in the 14 years. So there they came to Shiloh. What happened in Shiloh? So instead of the Mishkan, which they brought with them from the Midbar, and they placed it for the 14 years, this part in Shiloh, they built a structure out of stone. But yet, they used the curtains, the covers, the panels that they covered the Mishkan, they spread it on top of that Bayis Shel Avonim. There was no roof over there, just the panels. Bishin Samachtes Shono Omad Mishkan Shiloh. 369 years the Mishkan of Shiloh stood. Ukishameis Eli, after Eli, Shmuel and Eli, we learn about Eli HaKoyen in Shmuel Aleph, after he dies, Chorav, then Shiloh was destroyed. Ubou l'Noiv, and then they came to Noiv. And over there, Ubonu Shom Mikdash, they built a Mikdash there. Ukishameis Shmuel, and when Shmuel died, Chorav, then Noiv was destroyed. Ubou Givon, they came to Givon. Ubonu Shom Mikdash, and they built a Mikdash over there. And after that, Givon Bo Beis Ho'ilam. And from Givon they came to Beis Elam. How much was the total? Vinei Noiv. The Givon. Together, Shavu Chamishim Shana. 57 years. 369 years they were in Shiloh, and between Noiv and Givon, it was another 57 years. This is a lot of nice history, but what has it got to do with the Rambam, which is a Sefer Halachas? It's schwer zu verstehen. This is difficult to understand. The Rambam is doch a Sefer from Halachas. The Rambam is a book of laws, a Sefer of laws. So what difference does it make in Halacha, this length? As Matov the Mishkan begilgal, that they put up the Mishkan in the Gilgal. And then in Shiloh Nevi given, and then they put it in Shiloh Nevi given. So the Mishkan first was in Gilgal, and then they built in Shiloh Nevi given. This seems to be just a story about Jewish history. Hey, Emes. The Rebbe says, yes, it's true. As the Moker from Seder Habinyonim v'chulu, what is the source of the order of these structures, etc., from the Rambam, that the Rambam says here, is from the Mishnah in Masechta Zvachim, is from the Mishnah in Masechta Zvachim. But over there, this history is associated with halachas. But the Mishnah is an edokam yonim. But first of all, the Mishnah doesn't have to be halachas, but it also is associated with halachas. But the Mishnah is an edokam yonim, but eine nit halachas. The Mishnah is, there are many aspects that are not halachas. The Rambam is halachas, but Mishnah not necessarily halachas. Mashiach the Sefer Hayad from Rambam, as opposed to the Sefer Hayad from the Rambam state, nor from halachas psuka. That consists only of rulings that are the definite rulings, nothing else. That's what the Sefer of Yad of the Rambam is. Furthermore, but in the Mishnah, it's also not just stories. Also, the Mishnah is not just related just like that about the order of the structures. But it combines laws and applicable conduct that apply to them. As Boli Gilgal Once they came to the Gilgal, which means when they stood up the Mishkan, Hutra Bamis, then the Bamis, everybody could build on their own a platform to bring korbanos. Kachim nacholim chulu. The Holy of Holies can be eaten outside of the structure, outside of the Mishkan, outside of the Gilgal. And then when again they came to Shiloh, so there was a Beis Hamikdash Abamis. Now there's no longer permission to build and bring offerings in the Bamis. And when they came, they given Hutra Bamis. Now the Bamis are permitted again to be Makriv Bama in your backyard, if at that period of time. So it really depends, all this history, depending on what you're allowed to do. But thus, Alts is Oicha Gdoma. This is all, also, this is an introduction. As Nor Nogdem was, that only afterwards, Boli Yerushalayim. Once they came to Yerushalayim, Nesru HaBamis, that's when the Bamis have become prohibited. B'lohoylem Heter, and there was no longer any permission to build anything. That was the inheritance, that was the place where you bring the korbanos, only there. So the Mishnah brings down these times because there's different halachas. The Rambam, the Rambam, however, doesn't mention all this. When the time is moving by Pashto, why does the Rambam not mention there? Well, what happened. What difference does it make now to the Rambam to write halachas? What took place when they were in Neuv and given? It doesn't happen. Lashon Gemara is the hava. Whatever happened. Und zum Din in Rambam halacha gibel. Then, but the Rambam, he needs to write what he does want to write is in halacha gibel. That kivon shenivna hamikdash b'Yerushalayim, that once the mikdash was built in Yerushalayim, nesru kol ha'mekoyim kulom livnes ben bais la'avaye, all places were prohibited to build a house for Hashem, ulakri bem korban, to bring a korban them, zainen nit negeya. So to this halacha, to tell you that once you're in Yerushalayim, you can't bring anywhere else, it doesn't apply. We don't need to know as Boli Gilgal Hutra Abamas, that once they were in Gilgal, it was permissible. Boli Shilei Nesr, they came to Shiloh, was prohibited. We don't need to know that. So that's why the Rambam doesn't bring that. So therefore, why does the Rambam have to tell us about all these Beis Hamikdash? Because based upon this, the question, the surprise is greater. Aleph. Was bringt dem Seder von Gilgal v'chulu, what he brings, this whole order, Gilgal, etc. Mishambo, the Shiloh, if them came to Shiloh chulu, why does he bring down this whole order of all the various different places of worship they had between once they went over in the Eretz Yisrael, the whole Gilgal? Besides just mentioning the order, is noch before the Mispar from the Yorn, was jeder von sie ist gestanden. He details the number of years that each one of them was standing. Was das is doch that aspect of Bisman Gilgal V'chulu, even at the time of the Gilgal, when you need to know, can you bring a korban elsewhere or not, that you're allowed to. So nit mer van inyan for divrei Yisrael. So it's only knowing how many. It's history of it. On Gimel, and number 3, the number of years is not even brought down. Was breaks in their Mishnah. The Mishnah doesn't bring that down. So what is the Rambam's purpose in bringing all this down? So the Rebbe will explain this by first explaining why the Rambam needs to, when he talks Hilchos Malachim, why does he Bechlal have to mention about the mitzvah of building the Beis Hamikdash? Talking about the Melech over there. Hey, first we have to explain the reason was in Hilchos Malachim. In the laws of Malach Basretz, the mitzvah for Minu Melech. Over there, we're talking about the mitzvah of appointment of a king. We're talking about a king and the appointment of a king. Bring the Rambam of the mitzvahs from Binyan Beis Abchira. He brings the mitzvah also Binyan Beis Abchira. Not only Beis Abchira, not all Gimel mitzvahs. He brings all three also Mechias HaMolech. Al derech zeh gefindt men in Sefer HaMitzvahs. Similar we find in the book of mitzvahs of the Rambam. By derech and dort the mitzvah from Binyan Beis Hamikdash. Over there, when he counts the mitzvah of building the Beis Hamikdash, and he says, he's instructed us to make a home of service, and that what Hashem, may he be elevated, said, make for me a mikdash. Enough? The Rambam continues, no. He brings down his Hermois. The Loshen Sifri, the language of the Sifri is Sholish mitzvahs nitztavu Yisrael be'ez knisosum la'oretz, that the Yidden were instructed 3 mitzvahs when they entered into Eretz Yisrael. And he brings down the 3 mitzvahs: Limnos lahem melech, to appoint a king; Limnos lahem beis abchira, to build the chosen house; Ulahachriz areh shel haMolech, and to destroy, to cut off the seed of them. So here too, we don't understand. What are these other 2 mitzvahs connected by them bringing mitzvahs Beis Hamikdash? Why do we need to know about them when we bring the mitzvah Beis Hamikdash about the other 2 mitzvahs? Those was that hebt on. Also the way the Sifri and the Gemara, the Shona Gemara Sifri, it doesn't just tell you. He says Sholish mitzvahs. He says 3 mitzvahs. Why does he have to start 3 mitzvahs? You'll count it. You'll see. It's l'chayra yitalosh. It seems like extra language. 3 mitzvahs. Erech gleichus being Gemara Sifri. He's saying enumerates them. Making a king, cutting off, building the Beis Hamikdash, cutting off the seed of Amalek. Being Gemara Sifri, the 3 mitzvahs befrat. So the vos darfer freer magdin sein zeir mispar. Why does he need to introduce first the number by saying 3? L'sheina shas, as the Gemara uses the language, minyan alamali. Why do we need to know the number? And Ken Itzog, Rabbi says we can't say those were to the Pish Rashi. Rashi in the Gemara over there says, Lahachi nokat sholish halalu. Why does he count these 3? Because they hinge one on the other. You have to do it in this order. So you need to know if you're going to do the Beis Hamikdash, you have to do it in that order. Melech, first you do a king. B'achareo HaMelech, b'achareo Beis HaBechira. So this is the order you have to do it. So what does is nor mevayer nor vos nokat shalosh halol. That says, why do we mention these 3? Because it's important to know these 3. So I guess this would answer the previous question: why does the Rambam and Sefer HaMitzvahs need to bring it down, and why does the Rambam bring down in Mitzvahs Melech? Because the order is part of the mitzvah, but still would not answer this last question. This was not a child's law, but we still don't know why does he have to say 3 mitzvahs. You'll count and you'll see. Rebbe will explain that these 3 mitzvahs are inherently connected. It's not like these 3 together are connected. They're part. They complete each other, and therefore they have to be brought together. Both. The explanation in this. The 3 mitzvahs, Rashi, these 3 mitzvahs, as Rashi's language is, Tluya Zubazu, they hinge one another. This means, Hagam Azizain and 3 besondere mitzvahs, even though they are 3 distinct mitzvahs, is over jeder mitzvah, but each mitzvah, oich aprat, it is also a detail, which means bring shlemus, it brings in wholesomeness, in the andere 2, in the other 2 mitzvahs. So each mitzvah becomes wholesome through the other 2. Shleimus mitzvahs minui melech, the wholesomeness of the mitzvah of appointing of a king, where the gerecht is reached when severn euch ausgeführt the mitzvahs, when you also accomplish the mitzvahs from the hachris zari shalamolek ubinyan beis abchira. When you cut off the seed of Amalek and you build the beis abchira, that's how the mitzvah of appointing the king is fulfilled. Well, the same thing is by the others. Each one needs the other mitzvahs to become wholesome. Biz as shleim as ki mitzvahs binyan beis abchira. When is the wholesomeness of the fulfillment of the building of the beis abchira is verbunden between kima mitzvahs from minu melech and milchemes Amalek. That is connected, tied with fulfilling the mitzvah of appointing a king and waging war with Amalek. That's when you really fulfill the mitzvah beis abchira fully. Let it weiter arise from Posik, and as they follow up to this, that first we know they're connected, but we further learn out from the Posik that the order is also important. As the Shaykh has for Zu Bezu, their connections, not just we need them all three to complement each other in the full performance of the mitzvah, but the order is also, it's also the order is important. Frier minui melech. First, you have to appoint a king. Then to destroy, to cut off the seed of Amalek. Then binyan beis abchira, and then to building of the beis hamikdash. This means, do is nit nora seder in zmane hachiyu v'kiyum hamitzvos mitzad di'idin. This is not just an order in the times when the obligation and when the fulfillment of the mitzvah from the Yid's perspective, that Yid needs to do this first, this second, this third. Nitztavu Yisrael, mitzad the Gavra, where the Yid were commanded. Nor, it's not only that Sholish mitzvahs nitztavu, they're commanded. Nor this is a prat in Minui Melech. This is a detail in the appointment of the king. Mitzad dem Geder fun Melech, because of the definition of a king, darf sein milchemes Amalek ubinyan beis abchira. In order to be a king, there needs to be war with Amalek and the building of the Beis Hamikdash. Mitzad dem Geder from Beis Hamikdash, and for the definition of the Beis Hamikdash, fordert sich as soll sein minu melech milchemes Amalek. You have to have also the appointment of the king and the war of Amalek in order to have proper Beis Abchira. Und der Rebbe bringt dort the Rambam, and that's why the Rambam over there in Hilchos Melachim, where he brings that Michiyas Amalek from Michiyas Amalek, and then we have the Beis Abchira. The Rebbe bring dort the Rambam in Locha Beis, the Psukim, and that's why the Rambam brings the verses to prove that you first destroy Amalek and then you build the Beis Abchira. And the Rebbe asked before, why don't we bring the pasuk from the Gemara, in which it says, and what does the Rambam bring? When the king was sitting in his home, and Hashem has let him relax from all the enemies around him. So the king says to the prophet Nosen, I'm sitting in a seated home and Hashem is sitting in a tent. The Raya, not bringing from Posuk is nit belois, or them seder for Zman HaMitzvahs. We're not just bringing a proof in the order of the time which mitzvah comes before. If the Revolt Van Genug, the erste psukim was the Gemara bring. That would have been enough. The first psukim that the Gemara brings down. V'niach lechem mikol oiveichem v'goimer v'hoya amok mashiv Hashem goimer. So those are the psukim that the Gemara brings down. We could have brought down take. So that's not the purpose. The Rambam would say, "Nor be iker ados is an inyan v'geder in ki mitzvahs melech," is bringing the pasuk to say that this is an aspect. It's a definition in fulfilling the mitzvah of melech. Umilchemes v'achros hamelech, and the war according to Molech. Vahi ki yoshav hamelech beveisei. We're talking about specifically the melech, the malchus, not the order of the, but the king sitting in his halbeisa. Hashem hiniach loy misovim, and Hashem let him misovim. Vayomer hamelech. So it's all this has to do with the melucha. In order to be the proper min melech, it needs to be relaxed from it. The mitvet verstandig. Now, with this we understand, was the Rambam bring alle gimul mitzvahs. Why does the Rambam bring all the three mitzvahs? In Hilchos Malachim, when he talks about the kings. Und euch in der mitzvah sasei of binyan beis hamikdash, and also in the mitzvah sasei in Sefer HaMitzvahs, the Rebbe brought down from the Sifri, binyan mikdash brings down, because they are hinged and they're tied together. Zion. And now we're going to explain the arichas in Beis HaBechira. If you say zoich mevuer, that hemshich with the halachas in onefying hilchos Beis HaBechira. Based on this, we understand the flow in the halachas in the beginning of Beis HaBechira. Mitzvahs esel lasis by Hashem muchon. It's a mitzvah esel to make a Beis HaMikdash prepared for the karbonis. Shenamra v'osu limikdash. Make for me mikdash. Unis mamshich. And the Rambam continues. Ukvar nizbaer. Ukvar nizbaer is betoiro. Mishkan sha'asa Moshe Rabbeinu v'hoye lefi sha'achulu. In the Torah, it's been articulated the mitzvah that Moshe Rabbeinu did. But that was temporary. Das heißt, as mitzvahs binyan bayis lahavaya, that means that the mitzvah to build us bayis to Hashem geht euch auf der Mishkan, was Moshe Rabbeinu hat gemacht. It also includes it, not only there. It also includes that Mishkan, even though it's temporary. Und wie bald das Mitzvahs Binyan Beis HaMikdash ist verbunden mit den anderen zwei Mitzvahs. And since the mitzvah of the building of the Beis HaMikdash is connected with the other mitzvahs, Rabbi is explaining now brilliantly that we want to show that the other two mitzvahs were there at the time that we had the Mishkan. Ist verbunden mit den anderen zwei Mitzvahs. As zum Geder Hakim vom Binyan HaMikdash. In order to the definition, how do we fulfill the building of the Mikdash is negeya the friedike kiyum. So first you need to do for minui melech und der boniach from Chamas HaMelech. We need to be appointing a king and from Chamas HaMelech in order to have the Binyan HaMikdash properly. Darf man sagen, as is given Baale Bot HaMikdash. So we have to say that this was actually Baal the Bot HaMikdash. Those haste. Hagam as do seinen Gimel mitzvahs was nit stabu. Yisrael b'shas knessos la'oretz. These mitzvahs were commanded as a command. That is b'shas knessos la'oretz. The Gotland is das nur benegeya dem tzivui von alle drei mitzvahs. This command of all these three mitzvahs. When are we commanded for these three mitzvahs? But the definition, these application that they should be there, we need, because without it, we don't have a full definition of Beis HaMikdash, we don't have the other two. The Baal over as binyan, a mitzvah's binyan bayis la'Hashem is ein tzivu l'chol hadoros. The mitzvah building at bayis Hashem is one command for all generations. V'osu limikdash, and v'osus koilel. That includes Allah, euch die friedliche binyanim. Also the previous, before the Beis HaMikdash, is moved when it's understood as euch by jeden friedlichen binyan HaMikdash, Mishkan, also by each previous building of the Mikdash, which is, or the Mishkan, is thus given, Nochdem is given, this took place after the Given HaMelech, It had to be that there was a king over there, and Hashem has left them from all the enemies. In order, that's when the Beis Hamikdash is complete. Since they hinge, so it may not have that mitzvah, which is the command when they go into Eretz Yisrael. But as far as the definition, there should be then too. Nor kishem. Doesn't mean that this Hanich Misaviv and the Melech wasn't the full, because none of them was full. The Beis Hamikdash wasn't full until they came Beis Elomin, and the condition or Kishem with the Shleimus and Beis Hamikdash Atzmai. Just as the wholesomeness of Beis Hamikdash itself, a generation is given their Binya Beis Elomin, Shenivna Hamikdash B'Yerushalayim. That was the building of the internal house when the Mikdash was built in Yerushalayim. The same thing is the condition, the definition as an introduction. The Minui Hamelech, the appointment of the king, the word Malek, when were they complete in the wholesome way? When the Binyan Hamikdash in Yerushalayim Davki. High time bring the Rambam the Pasuk Lemigdosh, and that's why the Rambam brings the Pasuk Lemigdosh. When it's gleich mamshich, and immediately he continues. Ukvar nisparish b'Torah Mishkan shasam Moshe Rabbeinu v'hoyle v'sho. It already explained in the Torah the Mishkan that Moshe Rabbeinu that was temporarily. That Tzivu keeps shutay is doch given of Mishkan shasam Moshe. Literally, the Tzivu was for the Mishkan that Moshe made. Was euch der mit hat man kein mitzvahs binyan. By Hashem, also with this was fulfilled the mitzvahs building a structure to Hashem, with all the definitions that's in it. Or Moshe Rabbeinu Melech Moshe was a king, but the Rambam schreibt, as the Rambam writes, which is given took place after the war with Amalek Vayachlish Yeshua, as Amalek was Yeshua and weakened Amalek and his people by the sword. From that on is the Chivat Tziva also the Mikdash. So from that time it remained for every time. Over there, it was temporarily for that time. That also had all the definitions. Ches, like them is move on. Was the Rambam is Meirich onheimdig von Mishkan Shasam Moshe Rabbeinu v'Oili Fisha. Starts off with the Mishkan that Moshe Rabbeinu that was temporary. On his mamshich, and he continues. Kevon shenichnas la'aretz hamidu hamishkan beGilgal arba esher shana shekov shechol. Once they entered the Eretz Yisrael, they stood up the Mishkan in the Gilgal for 14 years that they conquered and they divided Eretz Yisrael. Was the mitizah mevayer. With this, he explains as the tzivum v'osel Mikdash by Mishkan Moshe, that the command from Osel Mikdash by the Mishkan that Moshe is given at Tzivul Doiris. That was a command for generation. Unas motim mekayim given, and they fulfilled them and amidim Mishkan v'chulu. When they placed it there, the chiluk is given not in the Meifin Hakim. It's only how they fulfilled them. It was all part of fulfilling that key. The Mikdash also Moshe. The Mikdash that Moshe built, the Baal that is given gebuit in Midbarun Oivgishtal Masla, since it was built in the desert and it got stood up from one journey to the other, is given in an Eifon Fun Mishkan on oil. It was a Mishkan, it was a tent. Not only Fisho, it was temporary. Umbemela is there Eifon Achiv Akiyim Nimshach. So that way of obligation and fulfillment, it continued. When they entered their Israel, as long as they were in the order, they were temporary there. So for 14 years, they continued with that temporary Beis Hamikdash to fulfill the mitzvah. Eider, the Gemar from the Arbes and Shana Shekov Shechol. Before they completed the 14 years in which they conquered and they distributed. When Yeshua was a king. So you had the king, and you had the Beis Hamikdash. And then they come to Shiloh Vador, Zayin in the Eden given in Amatzav. Over there, the Jews were in a situation of Menucha Yosef in Eretz Yisrael. They were in a more relaxed way in Eretz Yisrael. This was after they conquered and they distributed. Then they built a structure, a home of stone, not a tent, as they had till then. Nor Shin Samach Teshon Mishkan Shiloh. But it only stood for 369 years. It wasn't really permanent. Once Eli died, it was destroyed, the structure of Shiloh. And they came to Noivu Bonu Shamigdash. And they built Ukshameis Shmuel Chorev Boli Gibai. The Noi made Noivu Gibai Shiva Chamishim Shona, the says, and that even the says as when again Noivu Gibai, Zog the Rambam Bonu Shamigdash, that there too they built a Mikdash. Chosh, der Oren is dort nicht gewähnt, was the Chiddush, there was no Oren, das wird bekommen angerufen, bekam angerufen bei Magdoila, and it's referred to by Magdoila, it's still the part of the mitzvah of the Beis HaMikdash, weil the mitzvah by Binyan Beis HaMikdash is echt damals gewähnt. It was then too, this was all part of the mitzvah of the Beis HaMikdash. But yes, as is nicht gewähnt, ke Matzah von Menucha betachlis von Melchama. Because it was not a total relaxation from wars. The river may never be given. It's not an eternal house. We given from giving the came to Islam. But Damut is given the Inyan from Melech B'Shleimus by David Ushleimai, by David Ushleimai, Euch Shleimus Amenucha for Melchemes Amalek. Oistes. Ab ja now, wird werden verstandig, was in Onneib Hilchus Merachim, that in the beginning of Hilchus Merachim, read the Rambam wegen alle Gimel Mitzvahs. The Rebbe asked, why do we have to talk about the three mitzvahs when we're talking about the laws of a melech? And yet the Rambam brings about all the mitzvahs. Farvosa bring the posik, and also why he brings the verse of the Shichnei Sidrishu, Uvasa Shama, and he doesn't bring it. The Rebbe asked, Unavasa bringt nicht den posik, und nicht den posik, also the Migdosh that he brings in Hilchas Beis HaMechira. Unech nit ke posik mefurish benegei Beis Halomim, and also not the posik that specifically talk about Beis Halomim. Hayois as read wegen Zman. B'shas knisosum la'oretz. Here he talks about the time in Malachim when they go into the land, which is noch kibush v'chiluk, which is after the conquering and the distribution. That is when the Rambam is talking about in Hilchas Malachim. You should damut gewend der kiyum von der alle gimel mitzvahs shenitztavu. So there was already fulfilled all the three mitzvahs that they have been commanded, which are hinged one another. Agam, they exist. Agam is Taras Shleimus is given by Binyan Beis HaMikdash b'Yerushalayim, even though it was ultimately was the Binyan Beis HaMikdash in Yerushalayim. Showing given the Binyan from Abayis, already there was a structure of a home, nitkin oil lifneze, not a tent as before. It was noch the Yudalid Shona from Kibush v'Chiluk. After the 14 years of conquering and dividing, is given a matzah for menucha in Eretz Yisrael. It was a level of rest, relaxation in Eretz Yisrael. Us is given durch Yeshua, and it was through Yeshua's eris nismane geworden lemelech. He was appointed as a king. Through Moshe Rabbeinu and the Beis Din. With their mitzvah for Minu Melech Dav Zayin L'Doros, as the mitzvah of appointing king needs to be in the generation to come. Api Beis Din shall Shivim Zkenim Api Novi. Through the Beis Din of the 70 elders and Navi, which was Moshe and his Bezdin. Mashen came der Mishkan, was is given lifisho. This is as contrast with the Mishkan, which was only temporary. It was in the Midbar, journey. Nitin amatzav menucha, the one love menucha. Umoshe's melucha gefindt man nit as a zolzaina deminui. And he wasn't appointed. We don't find it was through appointment. So, therefore, it had all the ingredients. The Rebbe discussed earlier that in the base of Chida, the Rambam brings down the order of the structures and the different times the Beis Hamikdash was stood in different places. So the Rebbe asked, "What is this negei lahalocha? What can you learn out from this? And what does the Rambam bring it down?" So the Rebbe is going to explain that since we're saying that this was part of the mitzvah of Osul Migdosh, so therefore the prohibition of imitating the Beis Hamikdash applies to each one of them. The Rambam rules that the Osul Odom Sheyase Bais, a person cannot make a structure which has the Tavnis Heichel, that has the image of the Heichel, Achsadre, Tavnis Ulam, or a porch which has the image of the Ulam, or Chotzer Keneged Azora. You can't make a Chotzer that looks like or corresponding to the Azora. Can't make that image. Is ibald as the Allah is gerechte binyonim. Since the above mentioned structures, Hamgata din Migdosh, they had the law of a Migdosh. Not when the mitzvah of Vasuli Migdosh. By each one, we fulfill the mitzvah of Vasuli Migdosh. So therefore, you're not allowed to make an imitation of them as well. That we learn from this halacha. B, the Rebbe adds the bracket as Oich the Beis Hamikdash, to the extent that also the Beis Hamikdash, Agam as ein Tzir the protim, that the shape, the details from the Desorke Verochbe, it's the measure of the length, the width, that given anders wie Mishkan, they were different than the measurements of the Mishkan. Von deswegen seien in die Inyonim ha'ikrim shmoyet, the main aspect given bedugmas Mishkan was similar to the Mishkan. Wie der Rambam schreibt, as the Rambam writes, that you make another partition that surrounds, circles the heichel rechoikem mimeno, distant from it, kein kale achotzer, similar to the curtains of the courtyard, in the midbar. Everything which is surrounded in this partition, which is similar to the courtyard in the Oil Moed, one is called Azorah. So, therefore, the Rebbe adds, so that's why, because all of this is part of the mitzvah of Asiyas HaMishkan, so therefore it includes all of these different Yeshloimar as the Isu Lasis by Istabnis Hulu is Chal Oich, that this will apply of Noch Machen, the Tabnis from Mishkan, the image of the Mishkan, and also from the Mishkan Shiloi, and also Nevi Givan. They all have the status of the Beis HaMikdash because they're all part of the mitzvah of the Mikdash, and therefore making of their image is prohibited. Yudalef. I'm explaining this in the inner matter of things. In the Teuchen und Seder from the Gimel mitzvahs, in the idea and the order of the three mitzvahs is Chassidus Mevayer. Chassidus explains, Asoim tosim alecha melech, to put a king upon you is the bechina from Yira. That's the level of fear. Fear of Hashem. Or melech is in Yonei, because what is a king? What's the idea? The concept of a king is Yerei as Hashem Yisborach B'Yasser Seis. He fears Hashem with more force. At his bottle zum Obersten, he is subjugated to Hashem. Und durch dem Melech wird nimshach the Yirim bittul zum ganzen Am. And through the king, he extends the fear and the subjugation to the entire people. Asman de Grechschein zu der Pechina von Yira, der Inyan von Iskafia. Once you read to that level of Yira, which is the idea of subdue, then you got to erase Amalek. Der Inyan von Bi'arto Hara, that is to exterminate, to get rid of the bad. But that happens through turning it around. When there's the noch kennen, and only afterwards are you able to amendaf, and you need to zukommen to the madrege for your law to reach to the step to the level of the supreme fear. Was das kommt durch Beis Hamikdash? That comes through the Beis Hamikdash. Umikdashi tiro. The higher level of yira is Mikdashi, you shall fear. Was die madrege for yira comes from Bechinas Chochmah. That level comes from the level of Chochmah, which is the Inyan HaTorah, which is the idea of Torah. This is also in every generation. We have, after the destruction of Beis Hamikdash, we don't have the Mikdashi Tiro, the level of Yira, from the level of Beis Hamikdash. We have it the Dalad Amos Valachas, the 4 Amos Valacha, because this is connected to the Chochmah. And the Torah is Mechochma Nafkes, is Chochma, is Torah. Is there, but man verstehen. So based on this, we'll understand what was the tzivui of Binyan Beis Hamikdash, the instruction, the command to build the Beis Hamikdash. Und euch der Binyan from Erste Mikdash, Mishkan Bepoil, and also that the building of the first sanctuary, which is the Mishkan, actually, but gedarft sein Dafke durch Moshe Rabbeinu, that needed to be specifically through Moshe Rabbeinu. With the Rambam is Medayik. The Rambam emphasizes, specifically points to Kvar Nisparish b'Torah Mishkan she'oso Moshe Rabbeinu. Already explained in the Torah the Mishkan Moshe Rabbeinu did. Vorum Yamshochas Hadas to Yeder Eden, extending the level of Das to every year, because through them Kumpman through Yira, through the level of Das you get to the level of Yira. Is Ayidei Moshe, comes through Moshe. The Mergefinen. As if in Pasuk on the verse, what is God asking from you but to fear Him? The Gemara asks, he is fear something minor. The Gemara answers, it's a small thing. So therefore, the beginning of the Melucha, which is Yirat HaTorah, biz the Binyan HaMishkan, the kingdom, the Melech, which is Yirat HaTorah, till the Bilam Mishkan Yirei Lo, la'achar zeh, gedarft kuma, the Moshe Rabbeinu came through Moshe Rabbeinu. Because Moshe Rabbeinu is the level of Yira, and therefore he is the one that feeds both the Melucha and the Mishkan. Nochmer. The Inyan HaMishkan HaMikdash is doch K'maymer Hazal. The idea the Mishkan Mikdash is like our sage of lesson memories say B'toichai le'nemar el b'toichai. Doesn't say within the walls of the Mishkan Hashem will rest, but amongst them B'toichai meaning amongst each and every one of the as Yeder Id Ken, every Jew is able und darf öfton and has to accomplish to sein allein HaMishkan Mikdash, to be by himself a Mishkan and a Mikdash, Chanti B'Seichel. Und der Koyach of them hotter from Bechinas Moshe Vasidobim. And the power for this he has from the level of Moshe which he has. Well, the Alter Rebbe is Mevaizes Masbir, as the Alter Rebbe explains. Gabi Kolechad Vechad Yisrael is Yira Milsa Zutrusa. How does every Yid stack it with the Moshe Rabbeinu? Because it is in is a Moshe. The Moshe that's within everybody. It becomes Taka Milsa Zutrusa, even though for Moshe Rabbeinu, but it's for the Moshe in each one. So what is the Gemara answer for Moshe Rabbeinu? It's Me'imach, asked me from the end. That's talking about the level of Moshe which is within him. He has to accomplish the idea of Shechanti B'Seichel. But on the other hand, Shleimus for mitzvahs being by Hamikdash, but the wholesomeness of the mitzvah of the building of the Mikdash given by Veiselomim. This was in the eternal Beis Hamikdash, from the Inyan HaMelucha B'Shleimus, because the idea of the Malchus in its wholesomeness, Begoli, hat sich aufgetan, Davke durch David HaMelech. That came through King David. Bis zu dem Gile von Malchut Tachas HaShlemus, till the revelation of the kingdom in its ultimate wholesomeness, was wird sein, will take place when Yamid Melech mi Beis David. A king will be stood up from the house of David, Hoige B'Torah, studying Torah, V'Oisik B'Mitzvahs, Akbar Mitzvahs David Oviv, like his father David, V'Yokov called Yisrael, Leilach Boy, will force all Yidden to follow the Torah, L'Chazik Bitka, and to strengthen it, V'Yilchem L'Chemes Hashem, and then he will take the war of Hashem, B'Chulu, which is the Mechias HaMolek, Ubana HaMikdash, Mekeme, build the Mikdash in this place. Because that will be Zayin der Inyan for Melech B'Shleimus. Then the king will be in wholesomeness. The cutting of the seed of Amalek completely. As with Zayin Hashem Shalom, V'Akisa Shalom. The name is whole and the throne is whole. The revelation of the kingdom of Hashem. Und Shleimus in being Beis Hamikdash, and the wholesomeness in the building of the Beis Hamikdash. Abinyan Nitzchi, it will be an internal Beis Hamikdash. Was Mikdash Adnai Kerenu Yedecha, the Mikdash of Hashem, your hands have prepared. Quickly in our days, very soon, the Sichas Shabbos Parshas Dvorim, Tovshin Lamed Bo.